That song is called Spirit by DSN. You're listening, of course, to the Social Impact Show with me, Sam Marshall. We do this every Friday. We unpack the challenges that face South Africa, but we do it in a very constructive way. We're all about progressively engaging with this brand that we call South Africa. And as you've heard me say countless of times every Friday, is there are people that they don't really have a social life. And I think Kanthan Pillay is one of them. He just sits around and he thinks about, here's a problem, there's a problem, how do we fix it? I think that's what he does. Because what he did then with all of that is he wrote a book called How to Fix South Africa, an owner's manual. And then a couple of weeks ago, which has now become an incredible feature, and hopefully, I don't know, I think we're going to do a road show at some point. Maybe we'll book a stadium, we'll get a whole bunch of South Africans in there, and we'll just talk about fixing South Africa. I think maybe that's on the cards. I don't know. I haven't even shared it with him. But South Africa is, as you know, facing a crisis of infrastructure, service delivery, water shortages, transport disruptions, and delayed billion-rand projects. And Kanthan has thought about it, so I'm going to ask him about it. Kanthan, good morning. Thanks for joining me.
Sam, you were saying I don't have much of a social life, but I got pretty inspired this morning.
Yeah.
A former colleague of mine from both my ETV days and my Cape Times days.
That's why I'm saying you don't have a social life. Between fixing things, you're running things.
Hassan Tabada.
UWC comms manager.
That's the guy. He was I think he's still doing UWC comms.
Yeah,
so one
does.
of the things that Hassan does is he supports training of soccer stars from the townships.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't know that.
And so this morning he sent out a call to action in terms of anyone has got used soccer boots that they want to make available to youngsters. Please send them across to him, and he'd be very happy to have it. And or if you want to buy a new pair of boots for a deserving youngster, it's like 249 rand. So
that is amazing.
That's amazing. So
that is amazing.
So,
I've got four sons who's got soccer boots laying in a garage. I should just send it to him.
Absolutely. So I e-walleted him $250 to buy a pair, but I also figure let's do a call to action. If anyone's got that kind of stuff, just WhatsApp us 08422122919 and
let's contribute.
Contribute.
Let's
get it across to us. It's a great practical way because there's nothing that actually uplifts the community like sport.
100%. And I think to Gayton's point was that although I know he wanted another ministry, but he understood that if you have the sporting codes back in schools, back in communities, you uplift the facilities, you can get 1 to 10 kids away from the gangsterism and crime and funnel them into a sport where they can excel, and who knows, the next Benny McCarthy, the next Sean Bartlett. So I love that kind of approach to it.
So
right?
Look, both you and I have lived in Cape Town for extended periods.
Yes,
and we know the thing, particularly in terms of the Cape Town townships. There were only 3 things that provide social cohesion in the townships. The one is religion.
Yep.
The second is sport.
Yes.
And the third is gangs.
Yeah.
And we have to decide which type of social cohesion we actually want to encourage. And sport is such a no-brainer for us in terms of getting behind it.
And it's interesting you say that, Kanthan. I just had a conversation with Leslie Vartekane, right? And Leslie Vartekane, people like you, she's going to paddle and she realizes there's a problem with the paddle balls. After 4 or 5 games, they get dumped. So there are literally thousands of them. And what they did was, recently at the Cape Town Furniture Week in Daba, is they took all the paddle balls from all the courts and they turned them into furniture. And now they're saving tons and tons of these paddle balls going into landfills because it takes like 15, 20, 30, 40 years for a paddle ball to break down. And so they found quite an interesting solution. Yesterday we had a conversation with the CEO of Hotel Hope Ministries, and what they do is they take, very similar to what hospice does, takes all your old clothes, furniture, give it a new lease of life, and they're able to fund the work that they do with abandoned babies by just people dropping off old clothes, furniture and stuff. So there are South Africans out there thinking about how can they, instead of putting their hand out, find innovative ways to fund their solution.
No, that sounds flipping brilliant.
It is brilliant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So talking about that, we have a water issue, and if it doesn't get solved in Indonesia, they're planning to disrupt highways. But we've always had water problems.
We haven't always had water problems. Okay, so if you go back to the water infrastructure that was in place circa 1994, that water infrastructure is pretty much the entire water infrastructure that's still in place. And I don't know if you go have a look through my book, I think the biggest chapter that I've devoted out there actually addresses the question of water. So there's multiple problems in terms of water. So think of water kind of like roads, all right? So we got a road network. Which we spoke
about last week.
Yeah, but we got a road network. And the thing about a road network is that the road network has a capacity in terms of number of cars. Now, in the Gauteng area, there's 7% more cars on the road every year.
Yeah.
Because this is the economy of the nation, and we need cars to get around. And so every year, for every 100 cars, there are 7 more cars on the road. And this, of course, keeps repeating year after year. And unless we are building roads to keep up with that, so we need to add 7% more roads every year in order to just keep up with the number of cars.
Which we're not doing.
Which we're not doing. So exactly the same situation in terms of water. Okay, so the water situation in all of Gauteng was designed on the population of Gauteng
at that time.
At that time, 30 years ago. Now, have we been adding based on the population growth? Remember, this province, we're now sitting at around about 12 million people in this province. But you've got water infrastructure that was designed for 4 million people. So, because of the fact that we haven't had enough investment over the years of installing new infrastructure, so that's the first problem, just keeping up with the population growth. We haven't done that. The second thing is that we haven't maintained the pipes that were in place, the current infrastructure. Now, the estimates that we've got, and again, I quote the studies on this, that we lose something like 40% of our water because of the fact that there are holes in the pipes.
Yeah.
Just
40%.
40%, yeah. So in fact, using the existing infrastructure, we have 40% less water flowing through the pipe simply because it goes into the ground through holes in the pipes. And, so in order to replace this stuff right now, you've actually got to get down there and you've got to replace those pipes. And the interesting thing is there's lots of new technology that can actually help you get on top of this stuff. So there's actually...
That's astronomical. Yeah. 40% wastage. Year on year, the infrastructure, degradation of the infrastructure, plus a growing population. I mean, that's a storm.
Yeah, so it's a storm. And the fact is that we need to actually be getting on top of it. And the question for me right now is, do we have a couple of trillion rand, because that's the investment requirement to bring the whole country back on track? Do we have that right now to be able to do it? Well, we could probably find it because, there's money in the budget that doesn't get spent properly. But we've got very smart people in our country right now who actually are on top of this from a technology level. So there's a guy named Professor Anthony Turton, for example. He's one of the foremost water authorities in the world. And he's got some really good insights on how to do catch-up on this. And in fact, I've quoted some of his stuff in the book. Then you've got the guys who are working on the Lesotho Highlands water project. And
very well documented.
Yeah, and it's but more importantly, what these guys have got is they've actually got these robots that they can run into the water pipes. And that they can go up and they can do ultrasonic checking and infrared checking to see if there are any leaks, and they can actually then pick them up that way.
Yeah, I've actually seen it on Instagram. The technology is amazing.
It's exciting stuff. And the truth is that that's what we need to be doing, first and foremost, running that kind of stuff into the largest water trunking systems that we have.
But we're not doing it.
No, we're not doing it. And it actually requires that, people who are running those departments are actually smart enough to recognize what needs to be done. Instead, right now, what we've got is people who are basically taking advantage of the water crisis because it means that they can
tankers can come in,
tanker contracts.
Yeah,
and you can't run a country of 60 million people on water tankers.
And it's crazy to me, some of the stories that we've read in the news of actual sabotage so that they can bring those tankers into communities and actually...
I'm one of these guys who says that anything that actually sabotages the infrastructure of the country,
treason.
It's treason.
It's treason.
The guys should go to jail for life. There shouldn't be any question about
treason.
This. It's treason because you're depriving people of a water supply. That means you're effectively killing them because we can't survive without water.
That's true. How do you view one of the other big stories this week is that the planned maintenance, which is obviously necessary. We just talked about upkeep of infrastructure, but it's going to cause a 12-hour disruption. Surely there must be a better way to structure our maintenance. I've often had this challenge where we do road maintenance at peak, close of 2 lanes, and it affects everybody getting late to work. Now, unfortunately, if you've been late to work for 3 weeks in a row, your boss is not going to care whether you're late again the 5th time, and that has an impact on potentially whether you can keep your job. But how should we think of maintenance so that it doesn't cause a 12-hour disruption?
So there's a couple of different things we need to take a look at out here.
In relation to water?
In relation to water. So what we need to really check, and I'm pretty sure that if you'll find that the 12-hour maintenance thing is not really a 12-hour maintenance, it's to give an opportunity for the interim dams to refill.
Okay.
So in other words, they're trying to just basically cut off the water supply for a while to allow them room to top up.
But that's not the way they're wording it.
No, I know that's not the way they're wording it. So,
Wow.
but that would be the first place that I'd actually look at. The second thing is that when they say that there's going to be a 12-hour water shut-off in order to do maintenance, we need to be asking more questions about exactly what this maintenance is.
And we don't.
That's actually involved. And there needs to be people who are actually giving us a technical breakdown of what's actually happening and why it's required that there be a 12-hour shutoff. For example, I can understand if on a particular pipeline, they're shutting it off for 12 hours to allow all of the water from there to drain off so that they can send someone up into the pipe to have a look at what's actually going on. Yeah, I'll give them credit for that. I would say that's a possibility. But we need to be aware of exactly what it is that they're doing, and just to make sure that they're not just yanking our chains.
Something that you highlighted, Kanthan, which I think is now become even more interesting, and I think Trump is leading the way in this. I'll give him credit. Is that I think Trump has found a way for those in leadership to effectively communicate. He now communicates almost everything. And what I love about the way he does it, it's not him. He'll bring in his entire cabinet. He'll bring the head of that particular department. He'll say, can you say a few words? He has the media there. They can ask questions. And I think he's doing it in a way we've never seen. And I think he might have actually created a blueprint for how we should communicate these things. And just your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that's a very good point that you're making. And if you look in terms of our politicians, probably the only person who does that is Gautrain.
Regularly, even on his own platforms.
Yeah. So Gautrain's kind of in your face all the time. I think Trump has actually set a good example for the rest of the world at that level. No matter what you might think of his politics and so forth, the fact that he's constantly communicating to his electorate exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it, taking questions. I mean, this guy has had more press conferences in a month than Joe Biden had in 4 years.
4 years.
It's unreal.
He's taken more. He's had more press conferences than even he did in his first term.
Yeah.
I think he's literally breaking. I'm not sure where the Guineas are watching, but I think at the end of his 4 years, he might break the Guinness World of Records for the most press conferences.
It's very possible, but the thing is that this is something that all politicians should be doing. Yes, and they should be doing, and especially now with social media. So you don't have to wait for because we all know we've got biases in the media, and
yes.
There are some people that no matter what the ANC does, it's always going to be wrong. And there are some people, no matter what the DA does, it's always going to be wrong. But because now we've got this ability to communicate directly with people in real time, politicians should be doing it. I think the only reason they're not doing it is our entire government, apart from Gautrain, they don't really have anything to say in terms of what they've been doing.
But I think it also empowers them to keep the electorate in the dark. Because then we debate amongst ourselves.
But how long is that going to work for, Sam?
I don't think not much
because
longer.
I think now that we've seen that what it's like to have politicians who recognize that they're accountable and they're constantly speaking to the voters, I think that next election, most of us are going to look for people who've actually been communicating with us on a daily basis, and more importantly, they're accessible. You know,
I actually love
yeah.
what you're saying, Kanthan. I think you're predicting something in this election that we might actually see Gayton McKenzie's rise because of the work he's doing.
Look, I think that certainly Gayton is going to be gaining in popularity.
Okay.
Okay, and I think he's going to be gaining in popularity because there is that sense that he's constantly communicating. Frequently, he changes step, right? And we've seen him do this, but people give him the benefit of the doubt because he's coming back and saying, "Okay, I'm doing this now," whereas I said I was going to be doing something else.
So there's the illusion of transparency.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on public transport? We've now seen the disruption to the Gautrain, and now the announcement that they're also going to disrupt the bus services. And just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the Gautrain thing again was because we had someone who was illegally drilling a borehole in a place that
They shouldn't have.
that they shouldn't have done. And again, this is a failure in terms of processes that we actually have because we actually need maps in terms of where all of these critical things are running. And, you know, someone is drilling on their private property. How are they to know that the Gautrain is actually running directly underneath? You know, so so it's not the fault of Gautrain in this particular case. It is because we don't have proper systems in place. And more often than not, when we have these systems in place, if you have to go through the process of getting someone to actually answer a question from any municipality in this country, you know, firstly, who's the expert who is supposed to be knowing this stuff?
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, you know, you just have to kind of shrug and actually recognize, well, we need to fix it and move on.
But how do we fix it?
Yeah, well, the bigger question, you know, comes back to the entire public transportation infrastructure. And I think one of the points that you wanted to touch on was why the Rea Vaya project.
Multi-billion project, 16 years later.
So, yeah, so basically you need to understand what happened in terms of Rea Vaya. So Rea Vaya was brought in. We originally were meant to have a tram system. Okay, Rea Vaya was brought in. Why? Because it was significantly cheaper than a tram system. Okay, so the idea is that you can install far more buses for the same amount of money than you can install trams. And of course, that's why all of this infrastructure was built. Then you have the taxi association coming forward and saying, no, we are not going to allow these buses to actually be on the road because you are taking money away from us. So there was protection money that was paid to the taxi industry in order to get the Rea Vaya system in place. And we know where it's currently running. It runs from Joburg Central down to Soweto, and there's and all of the routes that are in between. And look, it's a good service. Let's be clear about this. It's when it's working, it's reliable and it's inexpensive, and you know people can hop on and hop off.
Yeah.
And it's got a much better safety record. But the route now from Alex to Sandton, which is the main thing that's in dispute, and also the entire route from Alex all the way down Louis Botha. Those are the two problems that we have right now. And the reason why those haven't gotten off the ground is because the negotiations between the municipal authorities and the taxi associations have broken down completely. Now, Cape Town has a Rea Vaya system. They call it My City down there.
Very efficient.
It's very efficient, and
actually, when you're in the CBD, I prefer it.
Yeah, and it's hop on, hop off. You know, just tap your credit card. There's no stress whatsoever in terms of how this thing is supposed to work. But the reason why they were able to do that in Cape Town, remember that the Cape Town Municipal Police, they will very specifically make sure that taxi drivers are not breaking the law.
Yeah,
in fact,
they go after them hard.
Yeah, they go after them hard, and then there's an entire unmarked vehicle unit of Cape Town City Police who will specifically make sure that taxi drivers are not breaking the law, and if they're breaking the law, they're immediately pulling them off. So the first thing you have to do is to get control of the taxi associations, but that actually requires
Somebody with backbone.
Well, requires, but you need to repurpose what happens in terms of our Metro Police. I mean, right now, what do our Metro Police actually do for us? They pull over vehicles and they check for driver's licenses and they check to see
Yes.
whether your license disc has expired.
And they pulled, it's so weird you're talking about that, and it just triggered me. I got pulled off by Metro Police for making a U-turn. I couldn't turn anywhere else. And as they pulled me off, 4 taxis went through a red light. But that lady the police officer was more interested in me making a turn than the 4 taxis that went through a red light, rushing and doing stuff.
They do not enforce the rules of the road. And
we all know taxis do what they like in Johannesburg.
Yeah,
they literally do what they like.
So you then have to ask, what is the actual role of Metro Police? Because at very least, for example, if a Metro Police officer is at an intersection and the traffic lights are not working, to my view, the Metro Police officer needs to be conducting traffic at that point.
They don't.
They don't.
I mean, how many homeless people have we seen now that do a better job than the Metro Police?
And, just let's just send a cautionary note out to all of our listeners.
Yeah.
Guys, just be aware, okay, that if you listen to those guys on the road and you happen to be in an accident, you cannot tell the insurance people that you are following instructions from this guy on the road. Okay, so please be aware at all times. Okay, the responsibility is still going to be with you.
With you.
Yeah.
30 seconds. Our final question, as we do every Friday, is what do we need to know about how to fix South Africa this week?
I think that what we need to be knowing about how to fix South Africa this week is don't stress about the budget.
Okay.
Because we ran our country for the past year on the existing budget. We can do it for the next 5 years. We don't need to spend more money.
Kanthan Pillay, thank you. It's always entertaining listening to you, but we learn a lot. Kanthan Pillay is the author of How to Fix South Africa, an owner's manual. If you want to get a copy, by the way, go to his website. What's the website again?
Howtofixsa.co.za.
Simple as that. Innovative, well thought out. He sets up the challenge and then provides the solutions. So it's called How to Fix South Africa, an owner's manual. We do this every Friday at 10:10. Thank you. We appreciate you for coming in, but we also appreciate you for listening. A journalist, entrepreneur, and author.